There was no evidence that Mr. Noriega was involved in drugs, no hard evidence until we indicted him.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
Have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Oh, probably, but it was for the good of the system.
Oh, we don't mess around in other people's elections, Jim?
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Rackets podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sadie, and I have the distinct privilege to have a very interesting guest on the show. His name's Raeford Davis. He served 6 years as a police officer in North Charleston, South Carolina. And then he took a very different direction with his life. He's now a very prominent activist in the freedom movement. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
No, thank you for coming. Yeah, if you don't mind, obviously your career and your life took a very different turn there, and I was just kind of hoping that you could maybe give a little introduction to the audience. Tell them a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, so like you said, I was a former police officer in the city of North Charleston. I spent 6 years there, 4 years on patrol, 2 years as a special victims unit detective. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I joined law enforcement. I grew up, kind of considered myself a compassionate conservative, and I joined law enforcement like most police officers do, with good intentions to help and serve my community and protect the vulnerable. Even sacrifice myself if necessary to keep the community safe. And I did that. My law enforcement career was cut short. I was hit by a truck when I was directing traffic and broke my leg, and that ended my law enforcement career. But I made hundreds of arrests, a lot of it drug related. And in North Charleston we had a 300-man police force, city of about 80,000, and I worked, mainly kind of the poor and minority communities, and our mission was get guns and drugs off the streets. Let's get tough and fight this crime. We're going to get out there and we're going to stop it. And of course, this is the big ramp up from law enforcement in the 80s with the war on drugs and everything. And here I was coming in 2000. So we've been doing it for 20 years, and I was going to get out there and patrol those same streets that law enforcement had failed to for so many years. And I was going to make a difference. And, I saw quickly, we worked very hard. There is real crime, real murders, thefts, assaults, that we dealt with. But I saw that, what we were doing wasn't working. And no matter how many people we arrested or how tough we got, we could only really kind of push it around a little bit. And also saw that when we interacted with the community and that getting tough and getting proactive, we would do things like, people that wouldn't use their turn signal long enough, we would pull them over and try to build that into a drug search and a stop. Or even somebody riding a bicycle, and they're, without a light on it, pull them over and try to build that into a stop. Grab people, pat them down, search their cars, drag them out of their cars, generally kind of harass them and to send a message, even if we didn't make an arrest. Right. And I saw just how counterproductive that was, and that we really looked like a violent gang. Mm-hmm. And you see that just with the numbers. And I saw that just morally it just didn't quite feel right, particularly with the drug war. Even when we arrested somebody and found a real criminal, he's got drugs on him. Is that really a crime? Should that be? Mm-hmm. And we kind of really learned that with alcohol prohibition. It's the prohibition that creates all the violence. It's what fosters that, not necessarily the substance themselves, even though they can be harmful. Mm-hmm. And so it was us that kind of created it. And the harder we fought, the more violent things would get.
Absolutely.
I saw that, and people have asked me, was there one moment or anything that really kind of turned you around? And it wasn't. It was small moments. We pulled over a kid on a moped one day, for like a rolling stop at a stop sign. Right. And, there's 8 of us cops. We're all standing around him. Hey, you mind if we search your vehicle? And some busted up with a moped. We're patting him down, going through his handlebars and everything. We found nothing and send him on his way. And I mean, we look like the violent gang. We earned that kid's enmity from that day forward. I mean, he's going to remember that forever. Mm-hmm. And we would pull people over, and you do that on a regular basis consistently, and the community's not going to like you.
Absolutely.
And even when we would arrest people for drugs, you would say, you know what, whatever you think about them, it's an adult consensual activity, use, and trade. And it's not violent. It's the prohibition that creates that violence. And so, but now me as a cop, what was I doing? Now, everything I did was legally justifiable, but I really began to question the moral justification of enforcing those laws. Me as a citizen, would I have a right to just go into some stranger's home, kick in their door, shove a gun in their face, pull them out of their home, take their belongings? Oh, you've got weed, we're taking that, and you've got cash, we're taking that, and oh yeah, we're taking your car and everything else, and we're going to lock you in a cage, and if you resist, we're going to shoot you and kill you.
All right.
Would that be right as a citizen? No,
of course not.
Of course not. But I mean, as a cop, I could do that. And how did that work? And the answer is it doesn't.
Right.
That your badge, you can't shield you from those fundamental moral principles, particularly when it's coming to use of force. And so while it was legal and constitutional what we were doing, it was morally wrong, and I didn't feel right doing it. And I knew that deep down, and so I went into when I got the opportunity, Detective Division, to like child abuse, child sexual assault, go where the real crimes are.
Okay, right. And
first of all, I noticed, there were, at the time, we had 2 detectives, including me, which was basically a know-nothing rookie. And that's the manpower that was assigned to child abuse and child sexual assault in our department. Yet we had 14 narcotics detectives.
Right.
And we had cases coming over the transom in our department. And the manpower, those cases did not, these are real victims, those cases did not get the investigation they deserved. Where you had real victims that were not treated fairly. And then you had unjustified cases or allegations of sexual assault where the investigations were so shoddy, we basically just charged them and move it on. And so we were most likely, arresting innocent people because we didn't do due diligence. And that was really kind of the last thing that got me, as a police officer and kind of morally was a particular case where there was allegations of an assault, but that's really, it was, I had a conversation with my sergeant when we were deciding to whether to charge this man or not, for sexual assault. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, look, if I was on the jury, there's no way I would convict this man based on what we have. And, my orders were charging anyway and let the court settle it. And I couldn't do it. I did it. I charged him. I charged him and I sent it on. But that was the last thing. So I saw as a police officer, even when we had real crimes, we did a horrible job, and that I personally was responsible for that injustice. I was the one to put the handcuffs on that man and lock him in a cage. And that wasn't right. And that's when I had been injured so I just kind of gave up, trying to stay in. I had to get out just for physical reasons. But that's really what kind of, made me give it up and get out completely.
Wow. That's a lot to digest there. I mean, for one thing, and I do have to ask, I mean, do you think that there's a reason why police work was so geared towards the consensual crimes, towards drug war, as opposed to, something that obvious, like you say, like the sexual assaults, where that's the type of crime that is universally condemned. So do you think that do you know what factors, in your opinion, cause the police force to put so much more resources and so much more effort into pursuing those cases?
Well, just so everyone knows, this is not just my personal experience. Just get an idea of really how, particularly drug enforcement, and how it has distorted policing, and what we've done to damage, our communities over decades. Is, first of all, the United States has the world's largest incarcerator. We incarcerate a higher percentage of our population than any other country in the world. Now, this is a shining city on the hill, the freest country. This is America, man, USA. Right. No, we have the highest incarceration rate by a mile. Mm-hmm. By a mile. And a lot of that is due to the drug war that we've done for, 47 years. So we incarcerate that, I think it's 2.3 million people. We have a total of about 7 million people under some type of correctional control. Make between 10 and 14 million arrests every year. We would have to reduce our prison population by 80%. We would have to let 80% out just to equal what Western Europe and Canada incarcerates.
Yeah.
So now our clearance rates. So you have murders and sexual assaults and rapes. Law enforcement, a clearance rate, and then that's and even that's a bad, kind of a misleading number. Murder rates clearance is 60%. So it means 40% of murders go totally unsolved. Rapes and aggravated assault, about 37%. So, you're looking at about 63% go unsolved. Uncleared. And when you have property crimes, and it's like 19%.
Right, yeah.
That's so when you say, well, that's what law enforcement does now. That's what they do now. And so why do they focus on the drug crimes? Well, as me as a police officer, it was kind of a broken windows approach. Well, you see, the drugs and is what's causing the violence.
Exactly.
And so that's why we have to go stop. That's why if you stop the drugs and you get the drugs and the guns off the streets, you'll stop the violence.
Right.
And so we did that. And now you got to look from the 60s and even earlier, and in the early 1900s, when they started, the Harrison Narcotics Act and all that. Those were racially motivated laws to begin with. Mm-hmm. And so segregation ended, but they still wanted to use police forces to control minority communities. Mm-hmm. So they came up with the drug war. And they said, oh, we're going to make these drugs illegal, like the marijuana that the dirty Mexicans uses, or the heroin and the cocaine that makes Negroes uncontrollable.
Right. And just to interrupt you, just so the audience knows, you're using exact phrases that were part of the propaganda at the time. Like, this wasn't even subtle. It wasn't even implied. This was directly stated as authoritative news.
Yes. And Harry Anslinger, who started, he was kind of the first leader of the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, and that's kind of his terminology. And so we use that. So now drug laws apply to everyone, but we would enforce it in particular communities, especially minority communities.
Right.
And so that's how it perpetuates. Now, police officers today, are they racist? Or they No, they're not. But yet we enforce those same laws that were historically and intentionally targeting minority communities to oppress them, to destabilize them. And so we've enforced those laws in that manner, increasingly more aggressively for the past 47 years. And now we're surprised at the results, that these communities are unstable, and have more crime. We created it. And so, but we said, well, we just got to get tough. You can't let up. And so that's part of why the police officers continue to go on. There's that real crime, but they don't understand, and they don't allow themselves to admit it. They know this. Every cop does.
Right.
But you can't admit it because if to do so would be to admit, hey, what we did was counterproductive.
Right.
What we did was oppress communities.
Right.
That's different. And you get paid to do it.
Right. When your paycheck, I wish I could remember the quote.
It's Upton Sinclair.
You got it. Look at you.
When your salary depends on you not.
I remember the one I can't place it either, but it's
difficult. Wait a minute, I got it.
Right.
It's difficult for a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding. and I love that.
Oh, it's perfect. It doesn't just apply to police work. Pretty much every sector, government, private sector, you name it. It all comes down to if there's that financial conflict of interest, it tends to make people behave in certain ways. So, yeah.
Right. And so, our department, we got lots of federal grant money to have these particular teams, weed and seed, or street level, what you call like the jump out or crash teams or whatever, to go out there and really work those neighborhoods hard.
Right.
And we get them from like Housing and Urban Development or the DOJ. Not necessarily like just straight from the DEA,
right?
To police these communities, and so the federal government was paying us. They're paying to put officers on the streets to go get out there and hit and target drug enforcement and other quality of life issues. And what we were doing was oppressing those communities, which is basically what police were designed to do, from Sir Robert Peel in the 1800s.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that when you speak about that always that I always think of is, because if we're really serious about getting the drugs, go to a college campus if you want to find drugs. But yeah, again, there's nowhere near the same level of enforcement. And like you said, you just mentioned, DOJ, HUD, the Department of Education isn't given federal grants to have police go in there and start busting college kids. Again, just a real dichotomy there. While you were talking, it kind of reminded me of it's a quote that, like, again, several people have said over time, and it's usually when they're referring to murder convictions, that it's better to let 10 guilty go free versus imprisoning one. But I sort of think of it along the lines of civil liberties, like when you were given the example with the kid on the moped. Like, yes, you did end up busting a lot of drug dealers, but how many innocent people did you have to shake down and violate, their constitutional rights in the process?
Correct. And see, I would even say that even the quote unquote guilty ones that were in possession of drugs, that
they're not.
We had
right.
no business arresting them or seizing their belongings. We had no business doing that anyway. If you look at really the Constitution, how did alcohol prohibition require a constitutional amendment, yet drug enforcement did not?
Right. No, at the time, there were a few people on Capitol Hill who did make that constitutional argument. But again, what you pointed out earlier, a lot of it had to do with that sort of racist and bigoted type of propaganda that really got Congress to push that in motion as far as the first drug laws. It was one of, several factors, but that was definitely one of the real motivating factors.
Right. And that's why I, speak out so much now, and why, why I'm so hard on cops is because they cause so much harm, and they very rarely really reflect on how they participate in this system. And again, it's difficult for them to understand. I knew something wasn't right when I was in there, and most cops do. They know, hey, this isn't working, or, this is kind of, they're frustrated, but they can't put their finger on it. And they're kind of like mentally blinded. And it wasn't until I got out, and it was until a few years after I had been out and really took the time to reflect on it, that I was able to kind of like mentally allow myself to say, yeah, it was us
Right.
contributing to this in direct ways and in some more indirect manners that perpetuated this, a kind of oppressive and destructive systems that we have, and that me as a police officer, I was personally responsible for.
Yeah. Well, that actually reminds me, I actually have a couple quotes from an article that you wrote. It was called, the title, and I'll have it linked in the show notes, was Disposable Veterans and Moral Injury. And you talk about that kind of compartmentalization that you're referring to, where you're told, well, I'm just following orders. And that's what, again, this applies not just to police or military. It's pretty much, everyone, but more so obviously with the police and the military. But one of the things, you make it very simple. You say, when you commit an unjust act, you are an unjust person. And there's a lot of just really eye-opening stuff. Maybe you could just kind of elaborate a little further for the audience who hasn't read that article.
Right. So, I know cops always say, well, if you don't like it, change the law. If you don't like it, vote for a different politician. Don't blame me. But see, here's the thing. Every individual and human being you have free will, and you have the ability to judge right from wrong. Mm-hmm. And it's that individual officer. I'm the guy that put handcuffs on people. I'm the one. A law or even an order is it's just a piece of paper. It's ink and paper. That's all it is. It's me that brought the resultant harm into physical manifestation. It's me that denied people their liberty. It's me that violated their fundamental moral rights by putting those handcuffs on, by dragging them out of their car, their home. I'm the one that put them behind the bars and locked the door. And so it was my actions that did that. And so, I bear that kind of moral responsibility for that, a higher burden. Now the politicians and stuff, they share their part too, but it was me that created the harm of that law and brought it into existence and actually inflicted that harm on another person. So yes, that individual officer has that moral culpability. For him to deny that is for him to deny his own free will. And you can deny it all you want, but you have that moral culpability for that. When you harm another person unjustly, even if it's legal, in the Constitution legalized slavery, it legalized Japanese internment, it legalized forced sterilization. It's legalized, massive amounts of atrocities. You see the Indian, Native American, Holocaust. Yeah. All of that was legal.
Absolutely. And that not only legal, that was culturally accepted at the time.
Well, it was, however, it was moral and unjust
Absolutely.
At that time.
Absolutely.
And so the same continues today. And let me ask you,
right? That's why I was saying. Go ahead.
As a police officer. So again, we have the world's largest prison population in history of mankind. And the United States, whatever greatness you think it is, has historically always been perpetrating mass injustice, and law enforcement and military members, government agents have been the ones to perpetrate that. So do you really think at this time in the world that everything you do is moral and just? Of course not.
Of course not.
No, I mean, it's hypocritical and really for you to even consider that. So ask yourself, if you're a police officer, exactly what are we doing that is immoral but is legal at this time? And well, the big one is the drug war.
Right. If I had to guess, that's probably what you would put at the top of your list. I mean, there are so many, just counterproductive laws. Because I know you're a member of LEAP, which was formerly Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. It's now, I think, Law Enforcement Action Partnership. So I'm kind of guessing that of all of the sort of criminal statutes that you had to enforce, it seems like the drug war is by far the worst in your eyes.
Well, certainly for me, it was like a street level cop. That was the big part of it, of how we really, destroyed people's liberty. And that was what was sold to us. And so that's what I saw. Now the government, obviously perpetuates a lot of abuses, and there's probably bigger ones, but just kind of like on a personal level between police officers and the community, that was really the biggest excuse for a lot of the abuses. And of course, is guns, drugs and guns.
Drugs and guns.
And
one of those categories are mostly legal, by the way.
Well, those are two things that the mere possession of should never be criminalized. Right. Just the mere possession of it. And that's the two things that we were going after the most, and criminalizing people for that.
So, I mean, because a lot of times when you pulled somebody over, again, a lot of times people are legal gun owners, and we've seen it, with, was it Philando Castile? But there's so much of this kind of, we see these instances of abuse quite a bit. And kind of, there was a recent segment on Bill Maher, and I just kind of wanted to comment on that. He kind of repeated what a lot of people say, most cops are good cops, but then he sort of kind of gives the counter. What I'm wondering is, do you think, because we do see a lot of abuse and excessive force by police officers, do you think that's a result of bad people going into the institution? Is that a result of the culture of the institution? Maybe a combination of factors? What's your experience with that kind of issue?
No, it's not like bad people going in. And, let's talk about like cop shootings and cops. It's very rare for cops to actually shoot and kill someone. Incredibly rare. Now, in the United States, U.S. law enforcement kills a lot more people than other countries do. Right. So there is a disparity in that respect, but overall, it's like 0.00002% of encounters where a cop ends up shooting someone. So in some ways, it's, that is kind of a red herring. I would say, the bad cop, good cop. It's good cops enforcing legal laws that create and are actually cause the most harm on our communities. And so again, we're arresting people for not, laws, again, the drug laws, gun possession, those type of things that shouldn't be a crime in the first place. Right. And all that's legal. And even if I put my, handcuffs on somebody real nice, and it's still horribly unjust. Right. And so now the abusive stuff, in a way, you talk about like training. We'll talk about training a little bit. When police are trained, and a good one is like you hear cops yelling, "Stop resisting, stop resisting." Right. In some of these abuse videos. And
when in many cases they're just not, just sort of tightening up or not really trying to, they're not trying to cause harm to you, but if you just tackled me, I'm going to, somewhat
You're going to put
up.
your hands out.
Yeah.
You're going to put your hands out or
react
something.
that way, right? Even if I'm not trying to harm you.
If you get punched, you're immediately going to try to like get away from that.
Right.
Somebody tases you, with a drive stun. I mean, you can't not stop.
Right.
Walking around. I mean, you can't, don't move.
Right.
I mean, that's cops know that.
Right, and they know that. Exactly.
And so, but the training, the reason cops can kill someone, and they do more than most countries, and then somehow it's turned around where there's like a 99% justification rate.
Yeah, I've seen that, right.
And the reason is the training is specifically designed to justify the unjustifiable.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
When police departments get together, now a lot of them, they won't admit this, but that's what their protocol does, is to say, hey, well, this, an officer might act in this manner. So we need to set up our training so we can go back and justify it and say, yeah, the guy flinched. And so, we shot him.
Right.
He went to his waistband. So we shot him. Right. Philando Castillo. Right. Or any of these others. Livonia, down in Florida, or Derek Cruz down in Florida, where these guys were totally unarmed, no guns. Cops shot them in their homes. And, it's good because waistband, furtive movements. So all of that is, they're intentionally trained that way. Now, what has happened, though, is now police officers, they've kind of bought that. And so they actually believe, hey, if anybody just kind of moves their hand a little bit, they could kill you right away. And so you better shoot them. And so it actually, it becomes kind of this perverse, kind of self-perpetuating cycle where now you do have officers that really do believe, hey, I got to shoot this guy.
Right.
In a situation where a normal civilian would look at this video of an interaction and go, you shot that guy? Seriously?
Right.
I mean, and so we hold cops. I think of, a convenience store clerk. I mean, convenience store clerks, they deal with some sketchy folks now.
They sure do.
And I mean, if jittery convenience store clerk shot people under a lot of the circumstances that you see police officers shoot people, you'd be going, these folks are crazy.
Right. That was exactly what I was thinking when you were talking about that. What if I murdered somebody in public? I said, well, we had harsh words and he reached quickly for his pocket. I'm pretty sure I'm going to jail on manslaughter. But when that's a police officer, that there's a whole different set of rules. And I think there's a whole different set of rules. Yeah. And that's intentionally so. And see, that doesn't do the police officers any favors. No.
So you're getting them to unnecessarily fear, and you're making it more likely that they're going to kill. Now, I'm saying that the training is specifically designed to allow cops to kill people, yet they still don't. And it's because cops, they're generally good guys and they don't want to kill people. And so they try really hard not to, but you have to countermand your training and your indoctrination to not shoot people. I think about just my time on patrol, and not that I was, this real, active cop. I was just a normal cop. And I probably could have shot, I don't know, between 6 and 10 people a year, and have been justified.
Right.
Minimum.
To where the paperwork you could get away with it on paper.
It would have been controversial.
Not been charged.
I could have shot, plenty of people a year, and that's just me, one cop. When you multiply that by the millions of cops that we have out on the street, and you can see how bad it could actually be.
Right.
But that's because I didn't want to. But I had to countermand my training to do that.
Right.
And so that's what happens is police officers, you see them, they stress and they actually fall back to their training.
Right.
And that's when they kill people unjustly.
Well, I remember the last time we spoke, one of the things you were telling me about is, because again, several times you had people resisting arrest, but when they did, and maybe I'm remembering wrong, but you were saying that the vast majority of them, they weren't trying to overpower you and harm you, they were just trying to get away.
Right.
Am I remembering that right or no?
Yeah, that's true. And I just had like one or two that just really were like attacked me,
right,
kind of thing. They're all kind of trying to get away. Now, I'm not saying they're not dangerous.
Right. No, I'm just saying that. But in other words, they're trying to get away. But in other words, it wasn't to where your life was necessarily in danger. They were just making the arrest was what could be lost, not your life. But now there, like you're saying, there were a couple of times though.
Yeah, and so again, it goes back to like the drug war and all this gun enforcement and everything. It makes cops unsafe, and so people that worry, well, cops do a really tough job, and look at this, and cops say, well, I almost got killed, 10 times this year,
right.
And you look at all those interactions, and a lot of those are drug arrests,
right,
or warrant arrest that was based on some other BS charge.
right.
And so why are you, so even if, from a cop perspective and a cop safety perspective, when you over criminalize communities, it makes it less safe for the cops too, because they have all of these potentially dangerous interactions that are unnecessary.
Right. Right. Yeah, if you could just minimize, keep it to the crimes that we universally,
to the real crimes,
right.
where you come
right.
in contact with someone.
And again, a decent portion of that crime would be eliminated if you were to end the drug war. I've seen different studies. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, you ask police officers, and it varies from, departments and everything. But you ask them, how many of your murders are drug related? Mm-hmm. And, they'll be like 40%.
So,
well, there you go. And, that's drug prohibition related. I never responded to a drive-by shooting between two liquor distributors.
Right.
Never happened.
Right.
Tequila is just as dangerous as crack cocaine. I mean, it really is.
I'd say more so.
Yeah, it could be.
By the numbers, but yeah, I mean, over the long term.
By the numbers it is.
Right.
But we never had shootings between liquor distributors.
Right.
The beer man, the Coors man and the Budweiser man, they can, here they are, fierce competitors, yet they can stack, beer next to each other in the same convenience store and get along well.
Right. No blood is shed. Taxes are paid.
No blood is shed, taxes are paid. Everybody knows exactly what they're getting in their product. Mm-hmm. And if Coors decides to intentionally spike their beer with fentanyl and kills people, well, then you would know exactly who did it, and you can charge, if you want to charge them with murder for intentionally doing that. I'm good with that.
Absolutely.
But see, now you can't.
Right.
And so, that's the difference, and that's how the prohibition creates all that crime. The cops are running around like chickens with their heads cut off trying to clean up.
Right, absolutely. And one thing I've wondered, and again, it's just my personal curiosity, because again, we do see there's a lot of this excessive force and police abuse, and in my opinion, some of it is predictable, just because of the institution. When police, you've got quotas and pressure to go make arrests, and if you go too far over the edge, there will really be no ramifications, and you got to put up with all kinds of stress and threats. Some of that, in my opinion, is just predictable. But what I'm kind of wondering, in your experience, and I'm pretty sure you probably witnessed, some police abuse or excessive force, was it really like a more inexperienced cop who's just kind of jittery, who doesn't really have his sea legs yet, or is it maybe people who've been on the force for quite a bit and have just kind of learned that they can get away with it? What would your experience be with that?
Well, it's a little bit of everything.
Really?
You're right, but you see which cops, in some ways it doesn't seem to matter. as far as experience and everything. Cops just have a massive amount of interactions with people.
Right.
And so that increases the chances of a lot of issues. Again, they're trained to fear. They're trained to escalate. That whole use of force continuum, that +1 is, where you elevate it. Any type of response that you get, you elevate it. Cops are trained to fear. They're trained to escalate it. They're trained with this whole, thin blue line. You come home at night to not value human life, and so that creates a lot of it. And then you also have police officers. They know how to manipulate situations, and there is incentive to actually create non-compliance with someone. And so a lot of this, particularly street level enforcement and stuff is, we would get out there and you actually you treat people, so they don't comply with you.
Right.
And
somebody who's just looking for a problem, basically.
Right. So I want to create an arrestable situation, because that's what we do, is we arrest people. Right. And so by doing that, I can, getting people out, making people come out of their car. And cops can tell anyone to get out of their car. But quite frankly, it makes very often, now not all the time, but very often, that increases the danger.
Right.
In some ways, the guy sitting in the car, he's a lot, he's not going to attack you.
Right.
Because he's got to go through the door. Right. But you do things like, get out of the car, put your hands up, don't move.
Right. I got you, right. The conflict of that, right? If they move,
right.
then they,
right.
either way they're failing to comply with your orders.
Failing to apply, and how you talk to people, sometimes you can kind of aggravate them.
Right.
And do that, and you start grabbing them, and they you go and put your hand on them, and they instinctively kind of reflex, and there you go. See, he's resisting right there. So now down to the pavement he goes, and those type of things.
But let me
running up on people, you pulling up and jumping out of that car really quick. That's a good tactic.
If you don't
door
mind,
popping, or that's what they call it, and that scares the crap out of folks.
Of course.
And so what do? They do furtive movements, or they turn around and run, or all those things. Now I got them. And so cops do a ton of that. And now, a lot of them do it intentionally. A lot of it is unintentional, because it works. And so that's just, you talk about, people in, like the sales business, not cops or soldiers, but they kind of do unethical things to make the sale.
Right.
And a lot of them, they really sometimes don't even quite know what they're doing, but they kind of bamboozle people, kind of fast talk, those type of things. And we do the same things as cops to make the sale. And for us, a sale is the arrest. And so it's unintentional. It's also intentional. Now, the most vicious and malicious cops, that's kind of frowned upon too. So because people really get upset with that.
And they also lose money. Those people sue when that happens.
Those people sue, and they cause problems for leadership and everything. And
but keep it to an acceptable level of damage.
So you keep it to an acceptable level, and what that is, and some cops, do more than others. And so that's why aren't all cops just these vicious maniacs? Well, because, we have to at least show some degree of accountability. So you don't have the most vicious psychopaths. They kind of get weeded out. But you have that middle ground. That's what you call, the good cops, the proactive cops.
Right.
In a lot of ways, those are the ones that are really causing the most harm out of the community. And some don't even realize what they're doing. And of course, we've been doing that in law enforcement, really for decades particularly. And so it is considered acceptable.
Right. Let me ask you, because you were mentioning the training, you were talking about you're trained to escalate the situation. I'm a guy who comes from a business background, and every company you go through, at some point you're taught how to deal with a difficult customer to try to de-escalate the situation. I'm just kind of curious what the training is as far as escalating the situation that you're referring to.
Well, they don't tell you need to escalate.
Right,
What they tell you is you must control the suspect. So you do lots of kind of dehumanizing terms. The suspect or the subject, and he finds some type of law that he violated, anything, jaywalking, anything, disorderly, because you rolled up on him and he cursed you.
Right.
So now it's disorderly conduct or whatever.
Right.
And so now he's a criminal and you're the good guy, and you can't let that go away. You can't let that roll.
Right.
You've gotta do something about it.
Almost gang-like mentality, because that's how the gangs are.
Yeah,
they had the wrong shirt on in our neighborhood. The same kind of.
And so there you go. And see a lot of things. And particularly like when you're using a gun, just by having that gun, and when cops they pull it out. So as soon as you pull your gun,
it's threatening.
Well, it does, man.
In their eyes. Yeah.
And so that person freaks because, there's this crazy cop. Now, whether it's legitimate that you're arresting them because they just stole something or whatever, they freak out. And so that makes them, you point a gun at someone and tell them to calm down at the same time is kind of difficult, especially when you're yelling, screaming.
Right.
Stop resisting, get on the ground, do it now or I'll fucking kill you.
And stay calm.
Like we've seen in cases, the Daniel Shavers case,
right.
Where people try and they panic.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have the gun in your hand, you've taken away every other less lethal option to deal with a subject. So now your gun's out. That's all you got. You can't physically restrain someone with one hand and hold the gun. Your gun is out. And so now anytime that person puts their hands out just in an instinctive manner or anything like that, they're trying to go for your gun, or at least that's what you're going to think. And there you are.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of things like that. And again, the same way with the taser too.
Let me ask you this. I mean, because obviously it sure seems like there's a lot of pressure to get these arrests. I know that in order to get promoted, obviously you have to get a lot of arrests. Are there sort of financial incentives? What could you kind of describe some of the pressure? Or is that almost like a competitive thing within the force? How would you?
Well, I mean, what are you there for?
Right.
You're there to catch bad guys.
Right.
I mean, that's what I'm there for. So personally, yes, I want to arrest people because that's how I'm going to get bad guys.
Right. I'm more wondering about from the structural level, like, because I've read of certain police departments where they specifically had quotas. I mean, they didn't call it, they called it productivity or something. I forgot, goals or something. Did you have a quota when you were working as a police officer?
No, I did not have a specific quota. And see, so if patrol division is different than you have like a dedicated specialized street unit or something. So as a patrol, I had to answer calls too and stuff. And so I may be working a lot of wrecks all day long. And obviously I can't,
right. Okay.
I can't make arrests when I'm doing that, and so, as patrol, we did not have in our department, every department's different and they go through ups and downs. We had times when we were real aggressive and then we would have, an incident where we would shoot someone controversially, and then the word would go out, hey, lay off. We've got to be cool. And so you see that, and even nationally, you see that go up and down. And it would just go even within departments. So, patrol is me, we weren't that incentivized to make arrests because we had kind of other duties to do. But your street level enforcement guys, oh yeah, hey, go out, bang them, make those arrests. How many? Let's see what we can do. And I think you had asked me about you talk about overtime, and I see some departments that that have overtime, and so I think New York does that, and some others.
There are several. I mean, this is something that I've studied quite a bit. Go ahead.
Let me tell you, we did not pay overtime like that at our department. You would get comp time back, but it was really, really kind of frowned upon to do a lot of overtime. So
you worked for an actual police department that tried to keep it within a fiscal budget, is what it sounds like.
Well, I don't know about that, but
maybe not.
It was frowned upon, and so we knew, hey, dude, don't make arrests at the end of your shift unless you have to. And so, because we want to go home,
right?
And now, so that was definitely incentive for us to not make arrests at the end of our shift,
right? And
make them early,
right?
But if you're working for a department that lets you do overtime like that, I guarantee you, I mean, cops that wanted to make money, that's what they would do, is they would roll around at the end of their shift and they would go do some kind of trash arrest. So you could do all of that overtime to process that person and everything like that. And that would just be purely driven.
And when you're saying trash, you're talking about, like you said, like a disorderly or something, just look to create crime. Just to bank it, because for people who aren't aware,
right,
that time while you're filing the paperwork and then you got to show up to court, you're getting paid overtime pay for all that time. And I mean, there are some police departments where the average officer is earning over $100,000, and it has a lot to do with that overtime pay. And again, I don't, and it's something that I've said before, that I don't think every police department's abusing it. In fact, I don't know what extent is, but there are some egregious cases. There's actually a pretty current example with the Massachusetts State Police. Like over 30 officers have been arrested, and they weren't even jumping through that hoop. They were just, again, this is what they're alleged of doing. They haven't been convicted, but it looks like they were just not even showing up for overtime hours and saying that they were, and actually, I forget which news outlet reported, they called them ghost tickets, where they were falsifying tickets that they wrote while they were on their regular duty to make it look like they were doing it after hours. So yeah, there's literally over 30 different Massachusetts State police officers facing charges for this stuff, and it added up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And again, it just gets back to what we're talking about. I mean, these are people who are supposed to be enforcing the law, and they're violating the law.
At what cost to society? And so even when you do have real crime, again, what I talked about earlier about these atrocious, theft rates, 14% clearance rate. This is what you're paying officers hundreds of thousands of dollars to do, and that's just the cops. That's not the legal system and the jails and the prisons and what that a massive amount of cost to do what.
Right.
And police officers and everybody in law enforcement, they don't want to have that discussion. They always redirect and say, well, we have crime in our city, so people need to stop doing crime. Right. Or they'll say, hey, it's politicians that have these stupid laws. It's not us. They always deflect and redirect. They never want to have that really honest discussion and really take the plank out of their own eye before they start talking about other people's specs. And that's what I try to do as an advocate. Wow. To help to challenge men that really want to do well and help their community is to really challenge them to do that and just stop laying back and say, well, obviously I'm doing good because I'm a cop and I'm a good guy.
Right. The actual accountability. Yeah. So we're basically coming up on the hour, and I know your time's limited. Just one last question for you. I know that you're, like I said, you're part of the freedom movement. Is there something that you would suggest as far as reforming police within the current confines? Not abolishing it. I'm talking about as of today. If you could, wave your magic wand, like what is like the one thing that you would put all your energy into changing to reform police efforts right now?
That's a really good question. Well,
I know
for police officers.
Oh, go ahead. I know you're for tearing down the system, and I totally get it. But today, though, like, what do you think that we could do to really make some changes that would really have a real effect?
Well, I think you should. Police officers today, in this, never arrest someone unless they have actually physically harmed another person. Just that's the only people you arrest. Now, if you want to write tickets or citations or something, whatever. But you stop criminalizing and arresting people that don't have a victim.
Right. That is actually somewhat realistic too. Right. I mean, we're seeing a movement as far as prosecutors to where they're trying to eliminate, the penalties for what I like to call consensual crimes, and just getting back to the real police work. We're seeing that movement as far as prosecutors are concerned. We're not really seeing that within the police movement. There are some people, retired police officers like yourself who are, making these kinds of statements. But yeah, like I said, I'm up against the hour here. Is there anything for the audience that you'd like to tell them, as far as following you or following your work? Any way to get in touch or whatever?
Yeah, well, the best way is probably on Twitter at Raeford D. And I've written a few articles. Some of them are posted at Libertarian Institute. I'm also a member of LEAP. It used to be Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and now Law Enforcement Action Partnership, Police for Reform. And so we've got thousands of other police officers like me, not just the drug war, but other very counterproductive uses of law enforcement that we have today that cause injustice in our communities. So check them out as well. And anyone who has a podcast or anything like that, I love to speak out. I'm not much of a writer.
I disagree with you on firmly. I'm linking, and I said that to you before. I knew you were sandbagging. I'm linking to that one article. Any other one, I'm going to link to those as well in the show notes. And we will prove you wrong on that one.
Okay, yeah. Disposable veterans of moral injury. To talk a little bit that moral culpability that everyone has. And then there's another one of their Libertarian Institute, Murder in Service of the Drug War.
Okay. I want to check that out, absolutely. Well, hey, man, I want to thank you for coming on. I wish we had a little more time. Maybe we can schedule something in the future. But yeah, I just want to thank you for being a guest on the show. And as far as the audience, again, thank you for listening. If you could share it with your friends, give it a 5-star rating. And if you do want to support the podcast, go out there and grab a copy of my 3-book series, Rackets. It's about the legalization of drugs and gambling and the decriminalization of prostitution. So again, thank you, Raeford. Any last words?
I just thank you for having me on. And yeah, you've done some good work too. Your articles on Daniel Shaver and that shooting, these people should check out as well.
Oh man, I appreciate it, man. Well, thank you so much again, and I'll talk to you later, my man.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
I am concerned that the size of some of these institutions becomes so large that it does become difficult for us to prosecute.
You can have a license. Price is $250,000, plus a monthly payment of 5% of the gross, of all 4 hotels in the store. Corleone.